everyone. So yesterday I got a question on one of my videos about how to vibrato with no shoulder pad. And I think it's a good question. It was something that I really struggled with when I first started playing without a shoulder pad or a shoulder rest, because the very moment you start playing without anything there, you have to learn how to support the instrument with the left hand. And that really sometimes feels as though it's locking your left hand up. Your left hand has a new duty it has to do. It has to support the instrument, and therefore it doesn't quite know how to flex in the same way that it might have when you were using a shoulder rest. So I'm going to talk about 3 ways to possibly approach solving this problem. So the main problem that tends to happen, and this is what the comment said as well, is that when you start supporting the instrument with your left hand, very quickly you realize that you tend to support it using this little crook of the index finger between the index and thumb. And the instrument tends to be supported there. And that tends to feel as though it's locked up and you can't flex because it's stuck there. And if you move it away, you don't feel as supported with the instrument and you're afraid it's going to fall and everything feels weird. So, the first way to solve this problem is to actually continue vibratoing with the index finger still touching the whole time. As opposed to trying to create space or trying to move it away, you can actually vibrato with it touching the entire time. It's a little bit tricky to do. It usually requires a lot of arm motion and a very wide sort of throwing, tossing motion of the arm to do it. And it also requires that you not be squeezing at all. A lot of people tend to squeeze here between the thumb and index finger because it feels more secure, but it will lock you up and prevent you from vibrating. So try to fight that squeeze. I used to do this by trying to support the instrument only with my neck and index finger and not with my thumb. I'd keep my thumb off. So I could get used to the way that felt without squeezing with my thumb. Anyway, so once you are not squeezing, you put it up there, and then if you throw your arm very actively, it tends to start by being a very, very wide vibrato, and you have to practice making it more narrow. But your finger will flex, that joint at the tip of the finger will flex, and your index finger will not leave the neck. Something like that. I don't know if you can hear, if I move the neck closer to the microphone, can you hear that sound? That is my finger actually sliding along the neck of the instrument, which is totally okay to do. It actually is just fine. You have to practice and get used to the feeling, but a lot of people do this and do it really well. A couple might be someone like Christian Kim, violinist. He has a video of the Bach Chaconne and another one of Erlkönig on YouTube. He plays with the Symphoniacs, I think. He does this very successfully, and you can see a lot of his vibrato is this wide arm vibrato that happens. The joints flex very nicely, but his finger doesn't leave the neck of the instrument, and it just slides along. Or there's an Armenian violinist, Samvel Arakilian, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Another very good violinist, very wide, vibrant, brilliant vibrato that he achieves in the same way by using lots of arm, throwing it back and forth, and letting that index finger slide. So that's one very valid approach. Number 2 is to solve the problem of having the index finger touching by actually not having the index finger touch at all. And the way you do that is by supporting it instead with the thumb entirely, by the thumb going underneath the neck of the instrument. And that's where your thumb will support it, and you don't need that index finger. Someone like Augustin Hadalik does this really, really successfully, almost all the time on every note that he plays. And what it does, when you put your thumb under, you can see almost immediately you get all this space here. I can put my whole bow through there. Lots and lots of space. And it gives you lots of room to vibrate and to flex these joints in a variety of ways and angles because you have all this room there. It doesn't have to slide. And so this approach also lends itself to a very wide vibrato, and it works in a lot of different positions, and I'll show you why. So in first position, keep my thumb underneath. You can see all that space. Lots of room for my whole finger to turn, to rotate, to twist, to flex. And it doesn't hit anything. You don't hear that effect. Some people, you can hear their finger will hit the pegs during their vibrato. You tend not to have that problem with that distance because there's so much room. The other thing Augustin Hadlick does is in very high positions, he continues to do this. Rather than resting the hand on the wood of the instrument, like a lot of people do, he actually goes up and creates space even here, maybe with this thing, here, between the wood of the instrument and his thumb. He keeps space as well. And so that lends him to be able to do a very wide vibrato, in high position even, very successfully, because there's all this room that he creates by lifting it, and the whole thing is supported still with the thumb just at the crook of the instrument. And so he got very good at supporting his instrument entirely with his thumb. He doesn't have to squeeze down very hard. He doesn't have to slide his hand against the wood of the neck. He just simply creates space and therefore allows himself a very wide vibrato in any position. So that's solution number 2. That one's a very it's a very difficult solution for me. I have to practice it a lot, but it works really well if you get really good at it. So I might recommend trying that one. And then the approach that I actually use myself, the third and last approach that I can think of, is to create a vibrato that sometimes flexes away from the neck, even though most of the time when you're playing, quote unquote, normally, your index finger is still touching the neck. So this way, I sort of default to playing with my index finger touching. And I don't really move it. I will say this, I do try and angle my thumb to be across from the part of my index finger that's touching, as opposed to very far back. Lots of people play with their thumb very far back. I try to keep it angled with my index finger, sometimes even higher with my second finger. I find that helps me stabilize the hand, and I know where my fingers are going to land, as opposed to just dropping them and hoping for the best. So that's one tip that might help. But then when I vibrato, I don't deliberately move away and create all the space, nor do I just slide up and down. I actually vibrato in a little circle that flexes the finger away from the neck and then back to the neck. So it's neither sliding up and down the neck in a forward-back motion like a lot of us learn, nor do I create all this space before I vibrato and then vibrato from the new angle. I sort of keep it and then just flex in a circle that moves it away and back. Something like that. I'll use a different finger. Can you see this? Sometimes it's a little further away when it flexes back, and then it gets close again. Something like that. And then that way I find that I don't have to change the whole angle of my hand. I don't have to switch to the thumb underneath. I can keep it where it is. Nor do I have to sort of throw my arm really hard to get it to slide along the wood. That sort of friction there can A, feel uncomfortable, and B, slow down the vibrato a little bit so it's a little slower and wider. And so I don't always feel comfortable doing that. I want something a little faster and narrower. So this approach lets me do that. There is a violinist who does this really, really clearly. You can see her hand. Her hand actually does this so well that you can almost see it rotate sort of this way, as opposed to just forward and back. It actually rotates. It turns like a light bulb. And it's Soo Bean Lee, Korean violinist, a very young Korean violinist. She does use a shoulder pad, but her approach to vibrato is literally this approach, I think, done at a very, very high level. And you can see it very clearly. If the camera angles down her neck, you can see her hand every time will start touching the neck, and then vibrate away from it, and then back. In a little circle. Very consistently, very, very successfully. I don't know if you can see in my hand, the rotation isn't quite as clear as it is in hers. But it's not just forward and back. It's not that. It's more a little rotation. And that's the particular approach that I like. It helps me feel comfortable on most notes that I play. I will switch to the others if I have to, given the context of a piece, right? If I have a lot of notey stuff and I really need to keep my finger touching for accuracy, and then I land on one powerful note, I may choose just to keep my finger touching and vibrato it with it touching, as opposed to creating that space or flexing away from it. And on especially very high notes, if I want this wide, beautiful Augustin Hadlick or An Sophie Mutter vibrato, I will create space the way they do. I will make sure there's space between the wood of the instrument and make sure that nothing is touching the neck of the instrument at all. And then I will try and flex using my thumb and all that free space to create that very wide vibrato and high position. So hopefully some of those things help. If they don't, please let me know in the comments below. I'll try to post another video that might explain more clearly, or maybe include some different approaches as well. So good luck and happy practicing.